Have you ever imagined living in Nazi Germany between 1933 and 1945? Most people picture it as a gloomy, oppressive, totalitarian nightmare, and for many, this was absolutely true. But what was life like for Germans who fit the standards imposed by Hitler? What did their lives look like?
Before talking about ordinary citizens, we need to understand how minorities lived, because the rights of these groups were almost completely eliminated as soon as Hitler came to power in 1933. Within a few months after Hitler's election, Jewish civil servants such as teachers, professors, engineers, and administrators were banned from working in government. After seizing state power, the Nazis organized what became known as Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass. Thousands of Jewish businesses, homes, and synagogues were burned or vandalized. Their owners were beaten and arrested. By 1941, almost all of the Jewish population in Germany, more than 500,000 just 10 years earlier, had been imprisoned in concentration camps. And the target wasn't only Jews. The Nazis launched an ideological war against almost every marginalized group in society: Roma, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, ethnic Slavs. One of the methods used in this campaign was forced sterilization. As historian Richard Evans states in his book, The Third Reich in Power, in essence, the Nazi regime used sterilization to crush those parts of society that did not conform to the Nazi ideal. Another frequently written aspect of this campaign was the Nazis' eugenics program, which aimed to systematically remove from society those they labeled Untermenschen, or subhuman. State-appointed doctors were authorized to euthanize children deemed unworthy of life, according to Nazi ideology. Between 1939 and 1941, more than 100,000 people, including 20,000 children, were killed under this program. This was truly inhuman. Now that we understand what the targeted groups experienced, let's look at what life was like for ordinary citizens. Men's roles in society were not drastically different from before, but women faced an entirely new set of expectations. The Nazi regime imposed what it considered traditional German values on women: modesty, adherence to Christian values, and most importantly, childbirth. The Nazis viewed the production of children as a critical part of their plan to expand the German nation. They even created a civil award called the German Mother's Cross, given to women who bore at least 4 children. In schools, students were taught a curriculum that encouraged racism and discouraged racial mixing. To quote Richard Evans again, "Teachers and students greet each other at the beginning and end of every lesson with the Nazi salute. Pupils listen to major political speeches broadcast on the radio in the school hall." The main goal of the Nazi education system was to embed the ideology into the minds of children and raise them as loyal soldiers for the future. Dating back to 1922, the Hitler Youth and its female branch, the League of German Girls, were established to prepare boys for military service and girls for motherhood. These organizations were incredibly popular in Germany, and by 1939, more than 90% of German children were part of the Hitler Youth. Even seemingly harmless institutions in Germany began to take on a Nazi influence during this period. The Positive Christianity movement was one such example, a state-supported initiative aiming to unite all Protestant churches under a single national church that would legitimize and support the Nazi agenda. Following the directives of propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels, the government distributed millions of radios to ensure that important political messages reached the public. However, despite all these efforts, many of these measures did not produce the desired results, because most people were simply interested in continuing their everyday lives as before. Realizing that the population could not be fully indoctrinated, the government began enforcing its ideal version of the German state through legislation. For example, all men and women between the ages of 19 and 25 were required to complete a 6-month public service program. Women were allowed to return home afterward, but men were then conscripted into the Wehrmacht, the German military. This system provided a constant flow of manpower for the ultra-militaristic Nazi state. The Nazis also introduced the Volkswagen, or people's car. intended to provide each German household with a vehicle as part of Hitler's campaign to motorize Germany. As for the economy, the Great Depression had devastated the German public before the Nazis came to power. In 1933, unemployment had reached 35%, and inflation was out of control. Naturally, the Nazis promised to fix the economy, and this earned them many votes in the 1933 election. Their first priority was reducing unemployment by launching major public works projects, such as the construction of canals and the Autobahn, highway. Hitler boasted about these achievements, even though the employment statistics excluded significant parts of the population, such as Jews and soldiers, making the figures manipulative. Still, it took years for unemployment to drop to stable levels. Despite promising peace before and after the election, Hitler dragged the German people into yet another large-scale war. As the military's need for resources grew, Hitler invaded more countries, escalating the conflict into a global war. As the fighting continued, even many within Germany realized that the idealistic utopia the Nazis dreamed of would never materialize. The number of casualties, especially on the Eastern Front, was staggering. When defeat finally came, it took nearly half a century for life in Germany to return to normal. The country was divided between democratic West Germany and communist East Germany until it reunited in 1990.